Can a mountain hide you from the most powerful military on Earth? What happens when the bunker you spent 4 decades carving into solid granite turns out to be a trap instead of a shield? Before we break down exactly what happened, do something quick. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and send this to the one friend who always wants to know the real story behind the headlines. Done? Good. Let's go. For 40 years, Iran believed it had found the one thing that could keep its weapons safe from anyone who wanted to destroy them. Not speed, not stealth, not advanced fighter jets, just rock. Hundreds of feet of it, packed between the outside world and the missiles buried deep inside. Iran's military leaders understood something very clearly. They could never win a dogfight with the United States or Israel. Their fighter fleet was aging. Their air defense systems lagged far behind. In an open sky battle, they would lose badly, and they knew it. So they went the opposite direction entirely. Instead of competing in the air, they went underground. The plan was simple in concept, but enormous in scale. Take everything that matters: missiles, drones, fuel, warheads. The machines that build them, bury all of it inside mountains. Tunnel deep into the rock, reinforce every passage with concrete. Build entranceways that vanish into the natural landscape, so that even satellite surveillance struggles to find them. Near the city of Isfahan, deep in Iran's interior, that plan took on its most ambitious form. Analysts describe a sprawling underground complex carved directly into the mountainside. A web of tunnels, storage rooms, and launch corridors, all hidden beneath tons of solid stone. Satellite images captured over the years show the site growing steadily. New chambers appearing, new entry points opening. The complex expanding season after season like a living thing eating deeper into the mountain. Iran's engineers even built decoy entrances. Fake tunnel mouths designed to trick precision weapons into wasting themselves on empty rock. This was not a quick fix or a desperate improvisation. It was a generational project. 40 years of pouring money, labor, and engineering talent into a single belief. If you go deep enough, no bomb can reach you. And for a very long time, that belief held. The math actually worked. Existing bunker busters in the American arsenal had limits. They could penetrate to a certain depth and no further. Iran simply built below that line. Stay deeper than the deepest bomb can dig, and you are untouchable. It was clean, it was logical, and for decades it was correct. Then everything changed. As regional tensions boiled over into open conflict, the United States began striking Iranian underground targets directly. Attacks in the Strait of Hormuz, strikes on nuclear facilities at Fordo and Natanz. A sustained campaign aimed at dismantling Iran's missile and drone infrastructure piece by piece. And according to Pentagon officials, including General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, American forces deployed a weapon almost no one outside classified circles had ever heard of. A 5,000-pound precision-guided bomb known as the GBU-72. This weapon was not designed to level a building. It was designed to do something far more violent and far more precise. Punch through layer after layer of rock and reinforced concrete without breaking apart. Survive a journey that would destroy almost any other bomb. And only once it reached the hollow space deep inside the mountain, detonate exactly where the real target sits. Officials confirmed the weapon was first used against Iranian underground sites near the Strait of Hormuz, where coastal defense cruise missiles were stored. Then, according to military reporting and open-source analysts, the same bomb, or a nearly identical variant, was aimed at Iran's largest underground missile complex, the one near Isfahan. And that is when something extraordinary appeared on camera. Video footage from the strike does not look like any ordinary bombing run. It looks like the mountain itself came alive and started screaming. First comes the initial impact, a bright flash buried in rock. Then, seconds later, a pause. And then, wave after wave of explosions erupting from deep inside the stone. Fire and debris pushing outward through cracks and vents as if the mountain is exhaling flame. Those secondary blasts are not the bomb continuing to explode. They are something far more devastating. When the weapon reaches the storage chambers packed with missiles, fuel, and warheads, it touches off a chain reaction. Iran's own stockpile begins detonating from the inside. Every explosion after the first is the mountain's hidden arsenal destroying itself in a cascade the rock above cannot contain. To understand why this strike sent shockwaves through every military planning room on the planet, you need to understand the physics Iran was counting on. Every bomb follows a simple rule. When it hits something hard, it slows down. The harder the material, the faster it loses speed, and the shorter the distance it travels before it either stops or detonates too early. Iran's engineers spent decades studying this principle. They calculated exactly how deep older American bunker busters like the GBU-28 could reach. Then they built their storage chambers just below that limit. Go a little deeper than the best bomb can dig, and you are safe. The logic was airtight, but it rested on one assumption. that American weapons would stay where they were. There were two fundamental problems with the older bombs that Iran built its entire defense around. The first was penetration depth. A bomb that runs out of punching power before it reaches the target just carves a hole in rock and stops. Everything underneath stays completely untouched. The second problem was structural integrity. Slamming into concrete and granite at extreme velocity generates forces that would crush most objects. Older weapons sometimes shattered during penetration, their casings cracked, their fuses triggered early. The entire payload wasted itself on empty tunnel space instead of the actual target sitting 50 feet deeper. The GBU-72 is engineered from the ground up to defeat both problems. Its outer casing is built from advanced alloys designed to survive deceleration forces that would rip older weapons to pieces. It does not crack, it does not break apart, it holds together through the entire violent journey from surface to target. And then there is the fuse. This is perhaps the single most important detail in the entire story. The GBU-72 does not detonate on impact. It does not blow up after the first few feet of penetration. It waits, it counts, it senses each layer of rock and concrete as it passes through. And only when it detects open internal space, the hollow chamber where the missiles are actually stored, does the 5,000-pound warhead fire. That one design decision is the entire story. It is the difference between scratching the outside of a mountain and incinerating everything hidden inside it. Old bombs cratered the surface. This bomb reaches the heart. But the weapon itself is only half the picture. How it arrives matters just as much. Some of the most powerful bunker busters in the American arsenal are so heavy that only the B-2 stealth bomber can carry them. And the B-2 has to fly from bases as far away as Missouri or the island of Diego Garcia. That means a mission measured in many hours, planned days in advance, with every detail locked in long before the aircraft even takes off. The GBU-72 changes that equation entirely. It is light enough, relatively speaking, to be carried by an F-15E Strike Eagle, a fighter jet already stationed at bases across the Middle East. That means a jet sitting on a runway in the region can be armed, airborne, and over a target in under an hour from the moment an order comes through. No intercontinental flight, no days-long planning cycle, just a crew, a jet, and a weapon already within striking distance of the target. That speed reshapes what is strategically possible. The United States is no longer limited to hitting targets it identified weeks ago. It can respond almost in real time to fresh intelligence about where missiles are being moved or stored. A satellite image shows activity at a new entrance. Within an hour, a Strike Eagle is overhead, with a weapon that can reach whatever is hiding inside. That timeline would have been impossible with older systems that required days of planning and long-distance bomber flights. And it means Iran can never be certain when the next strike might arrive. The threat is no longer something that builds slowly and visibly. It can appear with almost no warning at all. Here is a question for you. If you had to place a bet, do you think Iran's underground strategy is still viable after a strike like this? Drop your honest answer in the comments right now. And while you're there, hit subscribe if you have not already. Your engagement is the single biggest reason videos like this one reach people who actually need to see them. Now let's keep going. And the guidance system adds yet another layer of precision. The bomb can navigate to fixed GPS coordinates on its own, but it can also receive updated targeting data during its final approach. If the pilot has to suddenly break away to dodge a surface-to-air missile, the weapon does not simply fly off course and miss. It locks onto the last known target coordinates and continues toward them on its own. In an environment where Iranian air defenses are damaged but still dangerous, that kind of independence saves lives and ensures the mission still gets done. Put all of it together. A bomb that survives the penetration, a fuse that waits for the perfect depth, a delivery system fast enough to react in under an hour, and guidance smart enough to find the target, even if the launch aircraft has to run. 122. You start to understand why military analysts call this a turning point, not just another strike in a long war. 123. But here is where the story gets more complicated, because not everyone agrees on how much damage was actually done. 124. Some open-source military analysts who reviewed satellite imagery of the strikes on Iran's underground facilities offered a more cautious picture. 125. According to their analysis, the bombs clearly damaged tunnel entrances, support buildings, and surface equipment. 126. Entrances were collapsed. External infrastructure was destroyed. The visible parts of the complex took serious hits. 127. But the deepest vertical launch shafts, the actual core of the facility where the most protected missiles sit, showed no confirmed direct strikes. 128. In other words, the bombs may have sealed the mountain rather than vaporized everything inside it. 129. That distinction matters more than you might think. Sealing an entrance is still a serious blow. 130. It can stop missiles from being wheeled out for weeks or even months. It can trap transporter vehicles underground. 131. It can shred the surface logistics Iran needs to actually launch anything from that location. 132. But it is not the same as wiping out the stockpile completely. 133. If Iran can eventually clear the rubble, repair the entrances, and restore access, the underlying threat does not vanish. 134. It goes quiet for a while, and in a war that stretches on for months, quiet is not the same as gone. 135. This is actually one of the most important truths in this entire campaign. 136. Even the most advanced bunker buster in the American arsenal is not a magic wand. 137. Reports from earlier in the conflict describe Iran's underground missile complex near Isfahan absorbing nearly 20 separate strikes. 138. And still, missiles were reportedly being launched again within roughly 12 hours of each attack. 139. Depth and redundancy saved Iran again and again. 140. The complex was designed with multiple entrances precisely so that damaging one would not shut down the whole system. 141. Alternate routes, backup corridors, layer after layer of protection built on the assumption that no single strike could take everything out at once. 142. So when people say this strike destroyed Iran's missile program, that is almost certainly an overstatement. 143. What is more accurate, based on the actual reporting, is that this strike represents the most serious blow the program has ever absorbed. 144. Iran's 40-year assumption that depth alone guarantees safety has been proven wrong, at least once, in a way the entire world watched happen. 145. Whether it can be proven wrong again and again, strike after strike, remains an open question. 146. But the crack in the foundation is already there. 147. Now let us talk about why Iran would fight so desperately to protect this stockpile in the first place. 148. Because it is not really about the missiles themselves. It is about what those missiles represent. 149. Step back and look at the entire architecture of Iranian strategic power. 150. Iran cannot compete with the United States or Israel in a conventional, symmetrical war. Everyone knows this, including Iran's own leadership. 151. What Iran has instead is something different. Deterrence built not on strength, but on threat. 152. The ability to inflict pain that makes attacking Iran too expensive to be worth it. 153. Ballistic missiles are the backbone of that deterrence. In almost every direction that matters, they are the weapon that makes Iran's voice carry weight. 154. Toward Israel, missiles represent a constant threat to population centers. 155. The threat forces Israel to keep expensive air defense systems running around the clock. It limits how freely Israel can commit resources elsewhere. 156. Every missile in Iran's arsenal is a question Israel has to keep answering. Can we intercept it? Do we have enough interceptors? 157. Toward the Gulf Arab states, missiles serve as a warning. Support military action against Iran, and your infrastructure all become targets. 158. It is a message delivered not through words, but through the existence of weapons that can reach those targets in minutes. 159. Toward the United States, missiles threaten American bases scattered across Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, and Jordan. 160. They raise the political cost of any sustained military campaign. Every American leader has to calculate what a war with Iran would cost in lives. 161. Take the missiles away, or even seriously degrade them, and the entire web of leverage starts to weaken. 162. The Strait of Hormuz threat becomes mostly small boats and drones facing off against American carrier groups. 163. The regional proxy network becomes militias without serious firepower behind them. 164. Even Iran's nuclear ambitions lose some of their coercive power if the missile force that would normally shield that program is crippled. 165. That is why, in ongoing negotiations, Iranian officials have reportedly resisted any deal that places hard limits on their ballistic missile stockpile. 166. It is not sentimental attachment to the weapons themselves. It is cold strategic math. 167. The missile program is the connective tissue holding the rest of Iran's strategic posture together. 168. Remove it, and almost everything else Iran relies on to project power becomes far less credible. 169. The missiles are not just weapons. They are Iran's seat at the table. They are the reason anyone listens when Iran speaks. 170. Without them, Iran becomes a country with dangerous rhetoric and no way to back it up. 171. But here is something that has been consistent throughout this entire conflict. 172. Iran's government is not one single unified voice. In practice, it behaves like two separate power centers that do not always agree. 173. On one side, you have the political and diplomatic leadership. Their priorities tend to lean toward international legitimacy and economic relief. 174. On the other side sits the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. The IRGC controls much of Iran's missile program and its drone fleet. 175. Their institutional interest is fundamentally different from the diplomats. They want to protect the leverage that ballistic missiles provide. 176. They resist any agreement that would meaningfully shrink that power, because that power is a huge part of what makes the IRGC relevant. 177. Throughout this conflict, reports have described a strange, almost contradictory pattern that repeats itself. 178. Political officials signal openness to a deal. At the exact same time, IRGC-linked forces continue operations. 179. Sometimes they escalate. This has happened repeatedly during this campaign. 180. Reports of attacks on shipping occurring at the same moment. Diplomatic statements suggested negotiations were progressing. 181. This is not necessarily confusion. It may be something far more structural. 182. Two institutions inside the same government, operating with different mandates, sometimes without full coordination between them. 183. And that creates a serious problem for anyone trying to negotiate with Iran in good faith. 184. A political commitment made in Tehran does not automatically bind the military commanders who actually control missile launches. 185. A diplomat can sign a document, and the IRGC can fire a missile the same evening. 186. Both actions can be completely consistent with each institution's own internal logic. 187. This is part of why nobody watching this conflict closely treats any deal as final until it has been implemented. 188. The pattern throughout this war has been relentless. Announcement. Continued operations. Denial. New announcement. 189. Until actions on the ground match the words coming from negotiating tables, skepticism remains the only responsible position. 190. Real talk for a second. Videos like this one take hours of research and analysis to put together. 191. They only survive if people who care about real, deep understanding actually find them. 192. You can change that right now by sharing this with one person who thinks past the headlines. 193. And if you want more deep dives like this one, that subscribe button is your ticket in. Now let's finish this story. 194. Meanwhile, the wider picture around Iran has not gotten any calmer. 195. The Strait of Hormuz has been repeatedly declared closed by Iranian naval forces during this conflict. 196. Even as hundreds of commercial vessels continue transiting the waterway under American naval escort. 197. The gap between declaration and reality tells you a great deal about where actual control of the strait currently sits. 198. And it tells you why Iran's missile stockpile matters so much to its ability to make that threat credible in the future. 199. This war has also revealed something about where military technology as a whole is heading. 200. Alongside the bunker buster strikes, this conflict has become a live testing ground for a new generation of low-cost AI-assisted weapons. 201. Cheap precision drones costing a tiny fraction of the missiles they are being used against. 202. Autonomous systems operating at sea for the first time under real combat conditions. 203. Coordination software linking multiple unmanned platforms together with crewed aircraft. 204. None of this is experimental anymore. It is being used, tested, and refined in real time. 205. That shift matters far beyond this single conflict. It signals a change in how future wars may be fought. 206. Expensive, exquisitely engineered weapons on one side face off against a swarm of cheap, smart, expendable systems on the other. 207. Iran is watching in real time what a future built around this kind of technology looks like, and so is every other country. 208. The lessons being written in the skies and mountains over Iran will be studied in military academies for decades. 209. So where does all of this actually leave things? The strike near Isfahan did not erase Iran's missile program. 210. Based on the most careful analysis, it likely damaged support infrastructure more than it destroyed the deepest launch capability. 201. Iran's stockpile may still exist in the dark, behind rock that has not yet been cracked open. 212. But the strike did something else, something arguably more important in the long run than any single stockpile could ever be. 213. It proved publicly and undeniably that the core assumption Iran built its entire underground strategy around is no longer certain. 214. The belief that depth alone guarantees safety. The calculation that said, go deep enough and no weapon can follow. 215. That equation, which held for 40 years, has been broken. 216. For 4 decades, Iran's military planners looked at American weapons, calculated how deep was deep enough, and built accordingly. 217. That calculation was based on the tools America had at the time. The GBU-72 represents a new answer to an old question. 218, and it forces Iran to ask itself something uncomfortable in return. If this weapon reached this mountain, what other mountains are just as exposed? 219. That uncertainty alone changes the strategic picture. Every future decision now has to account for the possibility that depth is no longer a guarantee. 220. That kind of doubt is quiet, but it is powerful. It does not show up in a headline the way a mountain erupting from the inside does. 221. But it lingers in every planning meeting, every construction decision, every calculation about where to store the next generation of weapons. 222. Every engineer who once believed the rock above was enough now has to wonder. 223. Wars like this one rarely end with a single dramatic strike. They end through a slow mix of pressure, exhaustion, and internal struggle. 224. What the Isfahan strike really did was tilt part of that balance. It raised the cost of Iran continuing to rely on underground storage. 225. Whether that pressure is enough to produce a lasting agreement is still being written. History is not finished with this story yet. 226. But one thing has already changed for good. The mountain that was supposed to be untouchable answered back. 227. After this strike, nobody can look at a mountain the same way again. 228. 40 years of faith in rock and depth, broken in a single flash of light buried deep inside the stone. 229. The world watched a mountain breathe fire, and every government with something to hide underground felt the ground shift beneath their feet. 230. If this video helped you actually understand what is happening in this conflict, that is exactly why this channel exists. 231. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one.